Hi everyone! Hope you're all well. Today I'm talking with Quinn Deacon-Furtado, author of their debut book, The Lilies. Hi, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you. Of
Thank you. Same.
course. So, wanted to start off. Would you mind giving everyone a little summary of your book?
Sure. And I have it right here so people can get a little flavor of the cover. I also have the Barnes and Noble special edition. There's might still be some out there. Has an author's note in the front. We love it. So I think a lot of people can relate to this notion of reliving certain experiences in your head again and again, whether it's like regret or trauma. But like sometimes the way we remember things sometimes it's a little worse than what actually happened. um and sometimes you just get trapped in your own head. So I took this idea and I turned it into a psychological thriller in the context of a time loop. Four students at an elite private school get trapped in a time loop, reliving their own worst memories on a loop. Each one of those memories ties back to the disappearance of one girl, Charlotte. And each of these four narrators, unreliable as they are, hold clues about what happened to Charlotte and how it's related back to the Lilies Society, which is a secret society, the namesake of the book. They're each trying to hide the secrets of what happened from one another, but this ends up messing with their reality in the time loop. So they have to find a way to break out together and kind of come clean, essentially, before time can fully disintegrate. So, low stakes.
Oh, I love it. I love the secret society part. And I
Hmm.
don't see a lot of books with like time loops and stuff. And
Hmm.
I read it and I was like, this is amazing. And I love I love it whenever they were trying to like go back through and redo it and try to figure out like how to get through. It
Yeah,
was so fun. I loved it. And I like the dark academia kind of vibe to it.
totally.
It's amazing. I mean,
Totally.
even from the cover, you get that vibe. It's a
Hmm.
I love the cover, by the way.
I love the cover too. It was a process to get to this, and we wanted something that referenced the time loop. So you get like infinity symbols linking together on the spine. The Barnes and Noble edition has a little sparkle to it. So like it came out spectacular. I'm so happy with it. I'm so glad you like
It's
it.
great. I love it. No, I'm gonna be so honest. People say don't judge a book by its cover. I do. I do. If I see a good cover, I'm like, well, I need to look at this.
I hear you.
I
I
saw a
hear
good
you.
cover. What can I say?
Can't be mad
Um,
at it.
one thing that I wanted to say is I think you did such like a great job of writing for the younger characters. I loved Drew especially. Where did
Mhm.
you get the inspiration for the characters?
Sure. So the inspiration for the characters, I kind of wanted to capture like different experiences all within this specific setting of Archwell Academy, which is an all-girls school. Archwell Academy is like a fancy elite private girls boarding school in the DC suburbs. And like who's going to school there? You would think it would be mostly girls. Drew is non-binary. They're assigned female at birth. They're at the school because they've basically been admitted as a legacy student because their grandmother went there. So when I was working on Drew's character, I was thinking about, okay, what was that experience like for them? What was my experience like in school? And how did being queer and non-binary and feeling out of place at school, I was going to school in a time where it wasn't super emotionally safe to be out, or emotionally safe to question gender or sexuality, really. And so that element felt important to like bring forth for that character. With the other three, I was thinking about, okay, so how can we set up these characters so they're kind of in opposition to each other? So then we have Rory, who's the chancellor's daughter of the school, and she is she's kind of a mean girl, and she just wants to get ahead. She wants to be number one, and as a result, she's willing to do anything in order to get to that level. So she's a bit of a backstabber. She's also the leader of the Lilies Society, which is a secret society. And I was just thinking for Rory about how isolating that can be to like put on a fake front in front of it for everybody, just to kind of seem like you're perfect when nobody's perfect. Her ex is Drew. Not Drew, I'm sorry. Her ex is Blythe. That would be wild.
That'd be insane. Insane plot twist.
Her ex is Blythe, and Blythe is close to my heart. She also is a member of the Lilies Society, and as a result, kind of does similar things to Rory with like the social engineering and the manipulating, but she's really doing it because she is trying to live up to the expectations of her family. Like she's being held to a really, really high standard because her family has this idea about Black excellence and what that means in a predominantly white institution like Archwell Academy. And so she, I think, sometimes feels kind of isolated and does these things, these manipulative things that the Lilies do, really to protect herself. And then there's Vero, who is sort of the Banksy outsider artist of the school, a little bit of a fancies herself a rebel. And when I was thinking about Vero and developing her character, I was thinking about like, I'm a writer and an artist, and sometimes I'm very controlled by like my impulses and like what I think justice should look like in the world. And that is Vero. She has a very strong sense of justice, and it forces her to act sometimes before she thinks. And so she experiences a lot of regret around her specific memory in the time loop. And I wanted to talk about, with her character, I wanted to talk about what it's like to relive an experience that's related back to something you really believed in at the time, and maybe your mind changed. So yeah, those four, they're all sort of a bit of me, but they're all sort of very much a part of that setting, the school of Archwell Academy.
I loved Vero's character a lot, like so much. I loved loved isn't the right word. I did like the showing like how you said the like how she felt in her memory and then who she was whenever she was watching the memory and like reliving it and realizing that she did mess up and what she believed in and what she believed was helping someone wasn't. And I thought that that was great. I'm trying not to
Yeah.
spoil it, but
Yeah, it's hard to talk about the book without spoiling it because there are just so many
there's so many
secrets.
little things. And I'm like, how do I phrase this so I don't spoil?
Yeah, you did a great job.
One thing that I did want to talk about, how you kind of said it with Drew, was Drew's experience at like the school similar to anything you've experienced, whether it was during school or throughout just life?
Well, yes and no, because Drew is out, and I was not. I
Yeah.
didn't really understand what non-binary meant. I just knew I felt uncomfortable in my own skin. I knew I felt out of place in in the locker room, in the girls' room at the school dance. And I always thought that was a me problem. It wasn't until I was an adult, until I was a teacher in schools, that I realized the problem wasn't necessarily me. The problem was more so the way different schools functioned, and different spaces that claimed to be safe spaces weren't actually safe for me, but not just me, all kinds of people. So with the Lilies, I wanted to write about places that claim to be safe, like all girls schools, and pose the question, like, safe for who? You know, all girl schools haven't always been safe for gender nonconforming people and for people of color. And some things have changed over time for the better, but things are not perfect. And so I wanted to write about that experience, but from different points of view. And yeah, I think the while I did not attend an all girls school growing up, I definitely like the essence of Drew's experience is authentic for me.
I think one thing that was really cool is how you said you wanted to show like how the all girls school isn't really as perfect as it would say it is. I
Mhm.
think that what was really cool was that you show what different like how different characters view that perfection. And so for like Rory, she's trying to like be like she's trying to make it to the top of the school. She thinks it is perfect. But
Right.
then for Drew Rivero, they don't. And so I think seeing the different ideas about this all girl school was really cool.
Hmm. Hmm. And perfectionism. People experience that in totally different ways,
Yeah,
depending on, you know, what their family's like and backgrounds and all that. So, and you see a lot of perfectionism in settings like that.
definitely. Yeah. One thing that I loved is I mean, I have such a soft spot for thriller and fantasy,
Mhm.
and that's both like a huge aspect of the book. And I think the storyline and just overall concept of the book was amazing. Where did the inspiration from the book start? You touched on it a little bit like a second ago, but where did like
Mhm.
the idea take place?
Sure. Yeah. So I started talking about the idea for this book with my mentor, who's another YA author, New York Times bestseller, amazing Danielle Clayton. If you like fantasy and you haven't read her books yet, you absolutely should. She's amazing, and she mentored me throughout the process of writing this, and we started talking about, what would a setting like Archwell Academy be like right around the time that this particular feminist thinker named Bell Hooks passed away. That happened a couple of years ago. If you haven't heard of Bell Hooks, she writes all kinds of like nonfiction stuff that's pretty accessible, that's about feminism.
Mm,
And so what Danielle and I were talking about was this notion of like feminism um often is tied back to the idea of a safe space for women, but a lot of the time places that claim to be feminist, places that claim to be safe are not either of those things, or they are with a caveat.
yeah,
And so that's kind of where the ideas sprang from like our conversations about it, and from I just kind of imbued the different characters with my own experiences, and also my own experiences with things like memory and replaying things, having intrusive thoughts about like things that didn't feel good. And I think everybody can relate to that on some level.
100%. I definitely like, I mean, replaying memory is like, as someone who overthinks things, I'm constantly like going back and going over like situations and stuff and like memories. And it does kind of, I think you show that in the book, it does kind of warp a bit.
Yeah,
And you do show that from their perspective whenever they go back and see the memory and it's not how they thought it was.
right. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about creating the characters. And as the story progresses, I feel like you learn so much about all the characters and who they are. Did
Mhm.
you kind of start to understand them more as you wrote? Or was it like you spent time like developing them and knowing who they were before you went into the actual plotting and writing the story?
That's a great question, and a question that comes from, I can tell, a fellow writer. It's a little bit of both. So I go into every novel that I work on with a character sketch. And when I'm thinking about the character, it's not just like what color are their eyes and like what kind of backpack do they have, but those things are important.
Mhm.
It's also like, okay, what is their earliest memory? That's an important one.
Yeah.
What is sort of their worldview? What's their biggest regret going into the story? And what is something that um, they believe about the world going into the story that's incorrect? And the story is going to sort of change how they experience the world. So I had those things in mind for the four narrators going in. Um, as I wrote them, it's almost like, it's almost like they just appeared and started talking to me. And it's like, all right, now I'm just dictating, what are you saying? And
Mhm.
so as you get deeper into the book, when you're writing, you learn new things about your characters that sometimes contradicts with what you have early on. And so
Mhm.
something you have to do is go back and revise. And so the Vero in my first draft is very different than the Vero and the final draft. And part of it is because like I got to know her throughout the process of writing, particularly like for her in particular, her backstory. and her experience like growing up. I think of all the characters, she kind of has the most narration about what happened in her past that wasn't at Archwell. And so I think like that was something that kind of came out in the process of writing the book. For someone like Rory, I who like I noticed on the poll you did was like folks' favorite character. I was like, wow, cool. Okay. We're liking Rory. I
Yeah.
love that because she's easy not to like, but I think it's one of those love to hate scenarios sometimes.
Yeah.
Rory, I think like she was somebody who going in, I was like, all right, mean girl. Okay, we know the story of the mean girl. But I wanted to take that a little bit deeper of like, all right, what made you mean?
Mhm.
What happened in your life? And
Yeah.
that also came out through the process of writing, particularly with her relationship with her mom, the chancellor of the school. So I think anybody who's ever had like whether it's a strained relationship overall with your mom or like a one fight with your mom might relate to Rory and might see like, okay, this is why she this is how she got the way she did.
Mhm.
So I hope that's answering your question, just giving you a little flavor of all the different inroads.
It is. I creating characters is honestly one of my favorite things.
Hmm.
I I will have like character ideas in my head and not even have a story idea, but I just have character. And I'm like,
Hmm.
you, I want to write something about you, but I don't know what.
Yeah.
And I love uncovering stuff. I'm a huge Pinterest boarder for my characters.
Oh yeah,
I
definitely.
go crazy with Pinterest and stories. It's kind of terrifying. But I also one thing I like to do is I journal in the character's point of view.
I do that too.
Yep.
I
Because
do
I
that
think
too, and it's so useful.
you learn so much. It's one of my favorite
Yes.
things. I even will get like Barnes and Noble, I tell you, they have so many journals, and I
Yeah.
always get one that's kind of how I think the character would look or the journal that they would buy.
1,000%.
I have,
Sometimes when I'm writing different characters, I'll like put on a piece of clothing that I think that they might wear too. And that always like helps me kind of get into their head a little bit. So it's
yeah,
funny. I also use Pinterest a lot for like, particularly for mood, which was really fun for this, given that it's dark academia and everything. But it was very easy to procrastinate, just like
yeah.
in my Pinterest vortex.
It's dangerous. It's really dangerous going on
Mhm.
Pinterest for a book because you're like, I could write or I could work on character design in
Oh
Pinterest.
yeah. Yeah.
We know what we're gonna pick.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
I
with you.
so I swear by Pinterest. If anyone is ever like, I because I have some friends who like they'll ask stuff about writing, and I'm like, Pinterest. I'm telling you, I swear by it. It's amazing.
It's a great starting point.
I scare people because I'll tell them one of my boards for my books that one of the book idea that I have has like 6,000 pins.
Oh my gosh. That's a lot of pins, right?
It's terrifying. It's kind of terrifying. But it's here's the thing is it's a fantasy idea. So there's a lot.
Uh, there's a lot there. You have to build a whole other world. And
It,
you do that with a realistic story too, but
yeah.
there's
It
less
it's the
there's
kind
less to
of
draw.
world where it's an off-world fantasy. So you have to create everything.
Yes.
So there's a lot to it. That kind of
Yes.
explains the 6,000 pins, I hope.
Absolutely. And we're no one's gonna fault you for your 6,000 pins.
Thank you. Thank you. That's coming from a true Pinterester right there.
Oh yeah.
How we were talking about the cover earlier,
Hmm.
the stunning.
Hmm.
I wanted to ask, what was like the design process like, and how did you come up with the title and like tagline? And did you ever consider a different title for the book? I ask this because I'm so excited for cover design for my own book, but I don't
Yeah.
know what I'm gonna do, so I'm kind of picking your brain here.
Sure. Okay. So the original title that was on the table was The Archies because it was based on Archwell Academy. But that felt wrong from the start. It was just kind of a placeholder. And the reason is there's like a comic series called like Archie Comics that
Mm.
is like from a million years ago. And I think like people were gonna get thrown off. So
Mm.
the Lilies actually comes from, this is like kind of a personal story, but it is referenced in the Barnes and Noble edition, in the author's note. My dead name is one of the characters' names.
Mm.
And the Lily Society is named after named after that character. And I'm
Oh,
not going to spoil anything else, but it felt important to like draw out um a character with that name uh to make it not mine anymore, you know?
yeah.
Like and anybody who has ever left a name behind or even like, you know, gone by their middle name, not their first name, which I did for you know, my whole life, it it you know, can relate. With the cover design process, we where we started is not where we ended. We probably had like maybe like 7 or 8 drafts. Like I think the publisher was the publisher wanted to kill me because they'd send these drafts and I'd be like, the color's wrong, you know, and it was a lot. What we wanted to do was like reference some of the themes of the book and also reference the dark academia elements. Um, and the repeating patterns that come up in the memories because the memory repeats, but also there's an element to this story where you find out the characters are repeating the patterns of the previous generation, the original Lilies. There are little Easter eggs, like there's an infinity symbol on the stamp, and that is related back to the time loop and secret society and all of that. Um, and yeah, it took a minute to get there. In terms of the tagline, I'm gonna be real. The publisher chose the tagline, and I was like, at that point, I was like, great, we got the cover I wanted. I feel good. Go
Yeah.
for it.
I mean,
So
it's a great tagline. I like
yeah.
it.
Hmm.
It's great. I kind of like it because without spoiling anything, I do like the second line kind of hints back to the plot twist at the end.
Yes. And the namesake for the Lilies Society, that character who
Yep.
the prologue is narrated. So, you know, even if you haven't read the book yet, if you open to the first page, that narrator is the character we're talking about. So just a hint.
So it's a little hint. Um, what was your writing process like? Did you struggle with anything in particular, especially
Mm,
as like a first time author, which I understand so much, learning about like
yeah.
the world is so interesting and complicated, and there's so many little things that you kind of have to get used to. And
Hmm.
so was any if there was anything that you like any thoughts on it?
Sure. And anybody, whether you're writing a book or a short story, I think will understand procrastination is my number one problem. And it was such an issue in the early days of this. So it's like Pinterest, already talked about it. Also, Spotify. I like making playlists. Okay,
We're the same person. I
I
my
see that.
Spotify playlist for my book is insane.
Yeah. How many songs?
I-
Approx.
So here's the thing, is I have a main Spotify playlist for the book.
Hmm.
Um, and it goes chronologically through the book.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but then that's the main one. But then because I've already set that main one chronologically, I have a second one that's backup songs. And
You got it.
that
Yeah.
one is just random, like like any kind of song you could think of that would somewhat fit, it's there. I want to
I'm with
say
you.
the main one has like 30 to 40 songs.
Okay. Yeah, that's totally normal, right? Don't worry about the length of that one. Yeah, the Lilies playlist was like an easy time suck for me at the beginning of every writing day. So and I think the final playlist came out to like 32 songs, which is also chronological. I'm
Mhm.
a little more brutal than you. I didn't like keep a backup playlist. I was just like, well, this song doesn't work anymore, delete. But yeah, so procrastination was an issue. Um things that helped me kind of get into it, and this kind of comes up in the book a little bit. I don't know if any of your followers are like into tarot at all. I am into tarot. You're into tarot?
I love
Awesome.
tarot. Tarot's a part of the
Yes.
book, so I had to learn a ton about it. And
Yes.
it's so fascinating to me.
Yeah. I love tarot and it has been really helpful for my writing process. So every once in a while, like I will do a reading for myself, like where am I at as a writer? But with the Lilies, early days, I was pulling a card for each character every day. And that was really helpful in thinking about, going back to character development. It's like, okay, today I pulled this particular card and I'm writing from this character's perspective. What does this card say about this character's perspective? And so you see that come out in Drew's character early on because they encounter the death card. And they think of it as being this very sort of like negative, scary thing. And death is scary. Let's not beat around the bush. But um, death in tarot can also just be a symbol of like really big change. And so
Mhm.
that's sort of where the book starts, like at this big changing point. And so yeah, when I was writing, in order to get out of procrastination mode and into the actual process, tarot was really helpful for that.
I love that. That's so cool. I kind of want to try that now. Procrastination wise, I was on 3 weeks left. It's actually two stories here. 3 weeks left of my first draft deadline, and I
Mhm.
still had to write half the book. I had 2 weeks to write 16
Wow.
chapters. That's what it was. And I did and I would sit down for like 2 hours every day, and I did a chapter a day. My deadline was
Yep.
end of December, and I did it, and it was the craziest 2 weeks of my life.
Good for you. I hope you had like a nice long nap at
I
the
did.
end of
No,
that.
I did nothing after. I did nothing. I was like, okay, guys, I've clocked out. I'm done.
Yep.
I'm also
Yep.
at that point again because I'm in edits, and that's due on Monday. And
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Well, Godspeed. I
Wednesday
appreciate
books.
you taking the time. You got
You're
this.
good. You're good. Wednesday books. If you hear this, you didn't. You didn't hear this. You never heard me say that. No, procrastination is it's an issue, but then the last like 2 days, I pulled like an all-nighter. I get everything done. It's great. It's great.
Once you're in the mode, it's
Yeah.
like you can just keep going.
No, one thing that was super helpful actually was I just did classes at UCLA, and
Mm,
they have like homework that you have to do. And so I had to get in like that headspace of like, okay, I have deadlines. These are important deadlines.
yeah.
These are graded deadlines. And so I had to like basically yell at myself if I didn't like sit down and work on something, and I had to learn how to do that. And so that kind of helped me with working on the edits because I was already in that headspace. So once I finished all like the homework for my classes, then I was able to just switch over to the book and work on it.
Mm.
And I was like, whoa, what is this without procrastination? I didn't know this life existed. Um, Continuing on about the writing process, were there any specific like books or writers that influenced you during writing this book?
Sure, yeah. Books or writers that influenced me during writing this book. All right, so I was reading a lot of nonfiction while I was writing this book because I was really interested in this idea about repeating patterns and how people's behavior, people's mistakes are often the product of people who came before them. And so that is something that comes up in the Lilies. So I was reading, as I started writing it, I was reading this book called The Myth of Normal by
Ooh.
Dr. Gabor Mate. And it's nonfiction and it's about trauma, real fun. But that was super, super influential in creating the characters and creating the characters' internal experiences. I was also, I mentioned bell hooks earlier. I was rereading some bell hooks at the beginning of the drafting process because she had just passed. She has an amazing book, super short, really accessible. It's called Feminism is for Everybody.
Ooh, okay.
Amazing. Yeah, I would highly recommend. Actually, the opening quote from the Lilies is from that book.
Hold
And
on.
I'm gonna
I'm
pull it
opening,
up.
I'm opening the book. Oh,
It's right here. Yeah.
oh my God.
Um, yeah. I also, I'm not alone in like queer dark academia world. A Lesson in Vengeance is a precursor to this that like if you haven't read, really
I, I,
interesting.
I think
Sapphic. Oh yeah.
I
Mhm.
have. Yes. I was like, I know this. I know this name.
Yes. Um, and when we're talking about like the tone of what the book was going to be like in terms of vibes only, I was actually thinking of like Yellow Jackets a little bit. Kind of the backstabby, queer, like um, dark vibes there. But in terms of like authors that I find influential in general, I love M.T. Anderson, who writes young adult and middle grade, and actually I think he just came out with an adult novel, might be a vampire novel. I haven't looked
Oh,
into
I
it.
love vampire novels.
Yeah. And I love Daniel Nayeri. He is a National Book Award winner. He wrote Everything Sad is Untrue, and I just find him to be masterful as a narrator. And yeah, Adam Silvera, more happy than not, king of the, queer YA stuff,
Yeah.
and just like an amazing human being.
I met
So
him at a book fair and he was so
yeah,
nice. And I was like,
he's the
but
nicest.
when his they both died at the end, broke
Mhm.
me. Broke me.
It's brutal.
It's brutal.
You can't say the books aren't sad.
Here's the thing is you get the warning in the title, but you still
Yes.
hope. You still hope at the end of the book that they're gonna make it out of it. And you still hope.
Yeah.
Mm.
I can't wait. I can't wait for the third one. It's coming any day now.
And any day now. Oh my,
Any day now.
I just want to like pick his brain, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the comps for my book because my book
Oh.
have some like sadder-ish stuff in it. And
Mm-hmm.
I told him that. I was like, by the way, just my book is kind of like yours. And he was like, "Oh my God, that's so cool." I was like,
Yeah. He
"Yeah,
was honored, I'm sure. Super. And like it's an amazing space to work within. I love the concepts really. Like it's emotionally very resonant.
mhm,
You whether or not you're queer, you can really like latch on to these
yeah,
characters and the romance there. And I love sort of the speculative sci-fi Black Mirror of it all.
yeah."
And yeah, he's wonderful.
My favorite thing is oh, I'm forgetting the book name. It's the one whenever the like death warning thing starts.
Deathcast.
Death. It's whenever that starts. It's
Hmm.
that. And I loved that one because I loved that you kind of see everyone like learn about it and deal with it because in They Both Die at the End, it's already an established thing.
Right.
And so that's what I loved about that one. I could talk
Yeah,
about books all day. It's a
I
problem.
know. You have great taste too. So it's very like it's easy to just roll
I
with.
I have like I love genres all over the map. I
Mhm.
love to read how I write, which is every genre. I love thriller, fantasy, rom-com, like everything.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so my bookshelf is chaotic because it's like it goes from like Shadow and Bone, Red, White, and Royal Blue, like the Twin, if you know that book, any of those books, it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah, I think it's good. Reading widely is wonderful because then you get new perspectives on different genres. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, I see this person doing this in like this sci-fi space, but then I'm seeing this person try something very different in this more realistic space, but it's kind of tied in. And like it's just I find that very rich to read across a bunch of different genres.
I do. I love it. I think it's great, and I also think it's fun to because that kind of goes in to helping me write as
Yeah.
well.
Hmm.
Because like the one I'm doing right now, it's like rom-com, but some mystery. And so
Hmm.
I think that's kind of it's kind you don't I feel like maybe you don't see that as often. Um,
Mm-mm.
and so
No.
it's kind of fun to like bounce with that. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. That's great. And I think it's important to not, not limit yourself as a creator to like, oh, I'm writing just within this one space. So it has
Yeah.
to follow these rules. Which
Yeah.
is part of, I think the Lilies probably best falls into dark academia, but like could maybe squeeze it in with sci-fi speculative because of the time loop stuff. It's kind
Yeah.
of a low fantasy. It's definitely like sapphic queer, like thriller mystery, but it's a psychological thriller. I want to be very clear. This is not a stabby thriller.
It's not a stabby.
It is not. Yeah.
No, it's definitely a psychological thriller. I do agree with it could like with the sci-fi it's like sci-fi fantasy aspect with like the time loop and stuff. But then it also has a bit of like the romance part. I love it. It's so good.
Mhm. I'm so
Um,
glad you love it.
is is there anything possibly upcoming? Any new books people could be looking out for? Anything you can say?
Nothing I can say. Nothing I can formally say. But I'm hoping sometime in the near future I might have some news for you. But yeah, I'm working on a couple things right now and we'll see what happens.
Yay! This is so exciting. I'm now so curious. Oh, I love it whenever like they're like an author has a book that I love, and then they're like, well, guys, guess what? I have another book coming out. I'm like, there's more. There's
I know
more.
that it's always impressive because that usually means that that author was working on another book while while they were editing the book that just came out.
Yeah,
So I don't have that kind of bandwidth yet. Maybe someday
I
soon.
don't either. No, I met this author and it was at a book event, and she was saying like, oh yeah, I have another book coming out in 2 weeks at the
Oh
book
my
event
gosh.
for her book that just launched.
Wow.
And I'm like, how do you do that? And they're not like small stories. They're like
Mm.
fully fledged like fantasy books. And I'm like, how? I
Holding all the
don't understand.
details of the
I
two
don't,
different worlds.
yeah,
That's
no,
impressive.
I don't like I can barely balance one world. How are you doing all these different ones? I don't get it. I don't get it.
I
I think
hear
it's
you.
part of the procrastination part that I can't do two books at once, but it's fine. We're not going to talk about that. It's
No,
fine.
it's all
It's all good.
good.
What do you hope readers take away from the book? We've kind of talked about like the moral of the story
Mm.
and like the idea, like the ideas in it. But what do you hope
Mhm.
people take away from it?
Mm. Nobody's perfect. Everybody makes mistakes. It's important to forgive yourself. You know, each of these characters really struggles with their own thing that they did that contributed to Charlotte's disappearance. And some of them are more guilty than others. But they each get to a place where they can, not just hold themselves accountable, but also forgive themselves. And some of them it's easier to hold themselves account. Like everybody's coming to it from a different thing. So I just think nobody's perfect and you should not hold yourself to a perfect standard and try to show a little grace to the
Yeah.
people around you who aren't perfect either.
Well, I think you succeeded with that because like throughout the book, it is like the time loop. And I think the time loop really does show like you said, no one's perfect. And like the time loop teaches them to kind of forgive themselves and their past selves and anything they may
Hmm.
have done. And I think you succeeded. I not think. I know you succeeded.
Well, thank you. That's awesome to hear.
Okay. So one thing that I did want to talk about, and we've talked about this really the entire time,
Mm.
but one thing I did want to touch on is I think what's so important and amazing about this book is the queer representation shown.
Mhm.
Kind of have like such a wide range of characters,
Yeah.
and who they are isn't really like shoved into your face like some stuff. It just is. And I think that's really important to show. And I think you did an amazing job of showing that because it is just like it's not like this big like huge thing. It's a fact about who the character is, and I think that's
Hmm.
so important to show. especially like you start off with the book and it's like Drew introducing themselves and they go like, "Hi, my name's Drew. I'm they them." Like I go by they them, and I'm like, it's so simple, but it like it shows so much, and I think that
Hmm.
was very important.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. I think like that's great to hear, and thank you for saying that, Reagan. I think when I was, first when I first was coming out as trans and non-binary, and I was, starting to write stories that were more on the young adult side of things, I was reading about like trans and non-binary teens, but basically every single book that was out at that time was about the process of coming out and as trans and non-binary, or about like the main character who was a trans character being like at odds with their community in some way. Like it was like the problem of the story was that they were
Yeah,
trans. And it's like, let's just being trans is not a problem. Like it's just not.
yeah,
It's a problem for other people. Like some people make it a problem, but
yeah,
that's their problem. And
exactly.
so I think for Lilies, it felt important to have, put a story out there that it's like these characters can be all kinds of queer, and the story is like not about that. Like
Mhm.
it does, there's more than one aspect to this experience.
Yeah.
Um, and, same's true for like all of the intersection of identities that the different characters experience, like it is a fact of life, like the way we walk around in the world, regardless of like gender, race, socioeconomics, like all of those things, that's just in the background of your life.
Hmm.
And so you have so many stories to tell, within that context. So it feels important to like put the stories that you're writing for people, you and me and anybody out there writing, in the context of the character's lived experience, and try to make that as authentic as possible, whether it matches yours or not.
I,
So I'm
I,
so glad that it felt resonant for you.
of course, I just think because like you see a lot of stories where it's like the character being gay or trans or non-binary or whatever is who they are, and that is it. And
Hmm.
they don't really have a lot, or they don't really have any other like qualities about them because that is just in the story that is shown as solely who they are. But I think what was so cool is that it was just one fact about them, but you have this entire other person who has interests and hobbies, and it shows that whatever pronouns they go by, or what sexuality they are, it doesn't change. It doesn't really change who they are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, you're going to be you, whoever whoever you are, and I think like it when you're writing, this from your experience, you want to create a complete person, and they're not going to be defined by any one thing going on,
Yeah.
just like, people in life are not defined by any one thing.
Yep, exactly. What is your advice to a first time author? As a first time
Mm.
author.
Well, I think along the lines of the book actually, like forgive yourself because you are going to make some mistakes.
Yeah.
It is okay to not beat yourself up. Like you can hold yourself accountable without beating yourself up. And that may look like, okay, I'm going to put on a timer for how long I'm going to be on Pinterest. You know, it may look like,
Need to start doing that.
yeah, I mean, like, and then put on a timer for how long you're going to write after, and you can switch back and forth, if that's how your brain works. Like, that's certainly how my brain works. I need a lot of breaks. Um, So yeah, I think like just really being as gentle with yourself as possible, because writing is art. It's not just media. Like
Yeah.
as a writer, you're an artist, you're a creative, and that makes you sensitive. So like take care of yourself in the process, because it's very laborious to write a book
Yeah.
and to really write anything. So that's my advice.
I like that. I agree with the mistakes thing because there's especially like especially for edits. I feel like I had
Hmm.
a lot, especially with like forgiving and like learning from mistakes and stuff. And I feel like I learned a lot from that process, but I do agree about the mistakes. I think that, like throughout there's so many different things, especially like I said, as a first time author, like you're learning and like you can't fault yourself for not knowing something if you've never done it.
Right. That's right. And you can always learn it. You know, like you might make a
Exactly.
mistake with this book, with this draft, or like with this book. It could go to
Yeah.
publication with like, oh no, the comma's in the wrong place. Nobody caught it. But you do
Yeah.
have a lot of people like checking all of that in the publication process.
Yeah.
So let's say, something goes to press and it's like not the way and there's one thing you don't like about it, like you'll get it right on the next try. But the nice thing about writing a novel and having a publisher behind you is there are so many people putting in a bunch of like amazing effort to make sure it's the best possible story it can be.
You have
And
like a team like backing you
yeah,
up.
that's right. That's right. I've really benefited from working with editors. It's been wonderful. And like for me, the process of like, not beating myself up on like draft 5 when it's like, oh, like I made this mistake 8 times. Like that, it's hard not to do,
Yeah.
but you can fix it. Everything's fixable.
What
Mhm.
is one thing readers would be surprised to know about you?
Ooh, okay. I was invited to join a secret society, and I'll tell you the story. I
Wait, this
I
is so cool.
yes, I transferred to the University of Virginia, and yes, I was a junior and I didn't know anybody. And so it felt very unusual that I got an email in my inbox from an unknown from an unknown sender that just had a call number in it, like for the library.
Sounds like a murder mystery or
I
something.
know. So I went to the library and I looked up the book. So I was like, what's this? And inside the book, there was like a little note that pointed down. And I looked down, and at the bottom of the, stacks, like the shelf, was an envelope just tucked under and had my name written on it. So I pulled that out and I opened it, and it was just gibberish. But I had taken a code breaking class. So I broke the code, and it was a limerick telling me where to meet. I believe it was Society of the Dawn, at a specific time in a specific place. University of Virginia has a ton of secret societies. If you ever go to the campus, you'll see little signs
University
of
of
them.
Virginia now. I want to go there.
Ooh, it's a little spooky. I think the secret society thing's a little spooky, but
That's
that's
insane.
why
Did
the
you
book the
go?
book is
What did you
spooky.
do?
Well, Reagan, I forgot to go because I did not write it down in my calendar, so I just didn't go. But
No.
if I had gone, I would not be telling you this story because I would be in that secret society and I would have been sworn to secrecy.
You
So,
wouldn't have written about a secret society. You would be in a secret society.
correct. Yes.
That's insane. That's the craziest story. You said like I was invited to a secret society. My jaw dropped.
I mean, I'm sad to say that one of the experiences that I did not have of these characters is being in a secret society. But that's I went to a school where there's a lot of them, and I some of them I think are doing good things, and some of them I'm like, it's your deal. You're a little spooky and
Yeah.
sneaky. Don't get it. Why are you secret?
So
Yeah.
I can't believe you broke the code. Like you translate. That's so cool.
I just happened to have
Oh,
taken a code breaking class. It was like the equivalent of, how sometimes there are like math equivalents for universities. It was like the equivalent of rocks for jocks. It's like, okay, I'm not going to take calculus, so I'm going to take code breaking instead. And I learned how to break codes.
I used to, when I was little, I used to be like really big into like code breaking stuff, and I had a book.
Mm,
And I would like quiz everyone. I would write out a code and I'd give it to like my dad or something and be like, break this. I was
amazing.
so proud. It was cool though. It was fun, but I don't think I remember any of it.
Yeah, I wrote a postcard to a friend of mine who took that class with me in code, and they're like, "How do I break this?" I'm like, "We were in the same class." And to this day, they have not broken the code. They're like, "What does that postcard say?" I'm like, "I don't even remember. It was 15 years
God,
ago. I don't know."
that's insane. That's funny. No, if I like if I knew someone who like it's kind of like pig Latin or something. I
Hmm.
knew someone who knew how to break codes, I'd be messaging them like in a secret code all the time, constantly. I would think it was the coolest thing.
My skills are so rusty. So like, please, I don't. no one slide into the DMs with a with a like encrypted message. Like
You'll be
it's been
like,
a long
what is
time.
this?
It's been a long time. I don't have time to break codes. I'm like trying to write novels.
You're trying to write about breaking codes, not actually
Yes.
breaking codes.
Yes. Yes. Correct.
That's crazy. Oh my God. I love that story. What are you currently reading right now? I love knowing people are reading.
Ooh, okay. I'm reading this book called Venko by Cherie Dimaline. And it's like what it's one of these that's like it's many genres. It's like adult, witchy, speculative, futurist, um, maybe like a little bit, would we call it? I don't know. I'm not far enough in to say if it's a dystopia or not. Basically, the idea here, actually, it has to do with secret societies. The idea here is that the main character is being recruited to the secret society of feminist witches that basically run North America, and is imbued with this power through her like indigenous ancestors. The author is Canadian. She's the author of The Marrow Thieves, which is like also Canadian, but like, it won a bunch of awards in Canada, and I haven't really seen it much in the States, like out in the world. But that is another amazing book. Again, the author's Cherie Dimaline, and she's awesome. So yeah,
I have
reading it
written
right now.
that down and I am now going to look it up because I love witch books so much. I
Same.
read one that I recommend called The Invocations.
Ooh, haven't
It's
heard of it.
queer witches in London solving a murder.
I'm writing it down.
It's
That
I
sounds great.
recommend, highly recommend. And lastly, is there anything that you would want to talk about that I didn't ask? Just giving the option in case I did miss something. If there's anything you want to talk about.
Gosh, no, I think you're like a very thorough interviewer, Rig.
Well,
And
thank you.
like it's really great to talk to somebody who like resonates with the book, understands the book, and and as a result can ask such great questions about it. So I feel like we covered a lot.
I
And
appreciate
yeah,
that. I'm always like, I hope my questions are good. And I'm
yeah,
always like trying to like think about it. Um, but so I appreciate that a lot. That means a lot. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for being here. This was so much fun. Thank you so much.
It
And
was fun. It's fun to find out that somebody else writes the same way you do with the
I've
procrastination
I've
tools.
never heard anyone with the journals, and that made me so happy. I was like, finally, someone gets
Just
it.
sprinkle in some tarot and you're there,
Well, everyone, please read the Lilies. It's so good. And you could be cool and get the Barnes and Noble one too with the author's note. You can be cool like that. I'm also gonna get that one too. I want it now. But thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And I hope
Thank
you have
you.
a good day. Thank you.
Thanks. You too.